Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today I am so excited because we're going to be getting into the new Nars Valentine's Day collection. This has some of the prettiest packaging I have seen in a while, so I am so excited to get into this one. This collection is currently available on the Nars website, both Canada and the US. I will leave all of the links down below as well. But for this collection, Nars has a new eyeshadow quad in Sweet Kiss. We also have two new shades of their blushes. I only picked up one shade. I picked up the shade Impassioned. The other shade is called Cherish and looks to be a peachy type shade. And we also have one of their new explicit lipsticks in a limited edition shade called Only Yours. So the explicit formula is the one they came out with at some point last year. And I love that formula, so I am very excited about this. They also came out with their Nars Light Reflecting Powder in this limited edition packaging as well. They are really pushing that light reflecting powder. I don't love that formula, so I didn't pick that up. So first we have the eyeshadow palette, and this is made in Canada. This has a 12-month shelf life. Their Canadian formula is fantastic. So I'm always excited for that, and this is in their standard little quad packaging. Sometimes they do the soft touch matte packaging. This is just standard plastic, but this is what the color story looks like. So it actually does look very Valentine's Day-esque, and I am so excited about that. We definitely do give Nars a hard time because they release the same things over and over, and we definitely have some of these similar shades in our collection already, but this particular curation of shades to me definitely very feels like Valentine's Day. So I'm excited about this. We also have the blush, which also has a 12-month shelf life and is also made in Canada. So same packaging, just a little bit smaller. And then in here we do have this little blush. And this actually does look to be a little bit more of a pastel pink than I originally thought. And like I mentioned, this is the shade Impassioned. This is not a new shade. This is just a matte pink orchid. And this shade does already exist in their permanent line. I'm not sure if the peachy shade exists in their permanent line. I feel like I could have noticed that before and skipped on this, but I don't actually have a lot of Nars blushes in my collection, so I am kind of excited to try this one out. I also haven't tried any of their blushes since they reformulated last year, so I am happy to have this, but just know that this exists in the regular line, so if you purchase the blushes, it's just for the packaging. Then we have the lipstick. This is the new explicit formula. This is in the shade Only Yours. So I do believe this is a new shade because I don't see it in their regular line. But this is what the lipstick packaging looks like. How pretty is this? We have the Nars raised lettering. We also have that red packaging with the pink hearts. And then we have that magnet closure. This is what the shade looks like, so it does look to be a really pretty nude. So this packaging is easily some of the prettiest I'm going to have in my collection. I love this packaging so much. But let's get into putting these on the face and then we can talk about them after. So first up, let's get into the eyeshadow palette. Let's quickly look at some swatches and then we can create a look on the eyes. So they really didn't go too crazy with their shade names for this palette. Going left to right, we have shade 1, 2, 3, and 4. So definitely a very Valentine's Day-esque color story. I do think it's really, really pretty. I will also say the mattes feel so silky. I know we describe matte shadows very often as being very buttery, but silky is the most appropriate way to describe these. And this is definitely my favorite matte formula. Nars has one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas in general, but that silky matte, one of my favorites. So let me zoom you in and we can get to putting this on the eyes. All right, so I'm just going to start by picking up that very light pink. And it's a very light shade. It kind of almost looks a lot like the blush in this collection. And I'm just going to start by using this one as my crease shade. I don't think Nars always comes out with a very Valentine's Day color story, but I am excited for this year's. I know sometimes they will come out with a palette in January. Sometimes it's already like an early summer collection, but I am excited to see a Valentine's Day collection this year. especially with this year's packaging. Okay, that shade actually looks really nice on the eyes. I know it's very light, but it actually gave me a really nice amount of definition, and it's not pulling too pastel like I thought it would. In swatch, it looked a little bit pastel, but on the eyes, it's looking really, really nice. Okay, I'm not 100% sure if that's coming off on camera, but in person, this is just a really, really nice pinky crease shade. It looks beautiful. And that blended out so easily. Okay, next I'm going to take a smaller, denser brush and I'm going to go into shade number 3. And if you are new to my channel, I love Nars eyeshadows. They have one of my absolute favorite eyeshadow formulas. They're just so silky and easy to work with. Like, look how easily that red just sort of blended right into that pink shade that I already laid down. And I feel like I barely have any blending to do. That is what I love about the Nars formula so much. I feel like I sound crazy because I constantly rave about them, but that's why. I just love them so much. They take so much work out of blending and just working with these shades. It's just so easy. And they are a thinner formula, so they're going to be flattering on many different skin types. So if you do have more mature or textured lids, the Nars formula is one I highly recommend because their shimmer formula is always much thinner, so it's not going to enhance texture. And they're also just very thin and lightweight formulas while also giving you the pigment that you're looking for. It's definitely not my favorite type of red on the eye, so I am going to add that dark brown in the outer corner, and I do just want to use that pink to sort of blend those edges a little bit. I mean, I'm kind of on the same page as everybody else that they come out with the same color stories over and over again, but you can't deny their formulas. Going into shade number 4, you could also just do this and then use this shade as a liner, but I kind of do just want to deepen that outer corner a little bit with that brown. Okay, just adding a little bit there and then blending that edge. I have also ordered the new YSL quad, so I will have my review with that one up in a couple of days. I'm also super excited for that. They have another of my favorite formulas, so I definitely wouldn't miss out on that one. Okay, I don't normally add a lot on my lower lash line, but I do actually want to take a little bit of that brown just because I do want to smudge it out a little bit down here as well. I just feel like reds can be very finicky shades and they can very, very easily make you look ill. So one of the tricks you can do is to always add a liner or add a deeper shade like I did, or even smoke out the lower lash line. That also works very, very well. Okay, now I'm just picking up that shimmer with a finger. This is the part I am so excited about. And I'm just going to put this one all over the lid. This is a really, really pretty metallic pink. This is beautiful. This is definitely a very, very Valentine's Day-esque look, but it's also just something that is kind of appropriate for all year round. I'm going to go back into the brush I used for that more red shade and just kind of meld that shimmer into the outer corner. I am getting some fallout with that shimmer. All right, I love how that came together. So let me pop off camera. I will pop on some mascara. I'll come back to show you the finished final look, and then we can get into the blush and the lips. All right, so here is the finished final eye look, and I actually love how it came together. I'm still not a big fan of reds on the eyes. I don't know that I ever will be, but sometimes used in this way like we did today, I actually really do like it. I do think it turned out to be quite a bit of a Valentine's Day-esque look, definitely something very appropriate. And I think I would definitely use a lot of these shades. I think I would honestly maybe even stick to these 3. I could even just skip the red altogether, but for today's purposes, I really do like how it came together. The shimmer is also very, very pretty. It's not the most metallic, but at the same time, Nars shimmers aren't always the most metallic, and like I mentioned, they are a bit of a thinner formula, so they are going to be a little bit easier to work with and not as texture enhancing. But I have zoomed you out part of the way, not all the way, but partially, so that we can get into the blush. So like I mentioned, this is a pre-existing shade. I will pop up the swatch for you so you can see this is a matte pink orchid kind of shade. It's going to be a little bit more cool tone, definitely almost pastel leaning, but let's see how it looks. I think it's going to be great with this eye look. It does actually look quite pretty. A little bit more of a pastel leaning pink than I would typically prefer. But it does look quite pretty. It's almost got kind of like a lavender undertone. This is a nice formula. I do think it's quite nice. It's definitely on the more buildable side, so you don't really have to worry about getting clown cheeks or overly pink cheeks, which is really nice. It's a nice formula. I don't think it's going to be my favorite formula. I have been absolutely in love with the new YSL blushes, but I do think it's a nice formula. It's definitely solid. I think it looks nice enough. I don't know that it's going to be a favorite shade in my collection, but I do think it looks quite pretty, and it was definitely very easy to apply and blend out. Definitely on the more buildable side, which I do appreciate. But let's get into the lipstick. So this is in the shade Only Yours. This is going to be a more neutral shade. So they did come out with this explicit line last year, and this is like a very creamy formula. It's definitely very thin, but also has a lot of pigment to it. It's very, very beautiful. Just swatching it quickly on the back of my hand, it is quite a nude. It looks very warm though, which isn't typically the type of lip shade I go for when I go for these more nude tones. There's usually some element of pink in there. So I don't have a Nars lip liner, weirdly enough, but so I'm just going to line my lips with the Lawless Forget the Filler Definer Liner in this shade Cinnamon. I think this may have been a limited edition shade for holiday, but it was on a crazy sale for their after Christmas deals. What a beautiful shade though. What a beautiful shade though. I really hope that this shade is not limited edition. I imagine with my luck it is, but I do love the Lawless liner formula. They are definitely a wood pencil liner, but they're very creamy to put on. They're not as creamy as say a Charlotte Tilbury, but they're not nearly as dry as MAC liner, but then they just have this beautiful long wear dry down. They're just very long wearing, and they do such a beautiful job, and they're so comfortable to apply. But let's try on the lipstick. Okay, so the lipstick is actually coming off a little bit more orange than the liner, but they're actually a very, very good pair. Okay, that is the lipstick. I'm not 100% sure I love it with this look. Definitely not with this blush. This lipstick is definitely a little bit more on the deeper side. It's actually reminding me a little bit of a deeper version of Nars Morocco. So I just swatched them side by side. I don't have the bullet Morocco, but I do have the Air Matte formula. So you can actually see the swatches side by side here. So this is the new shade in Only Yours, and then down here is the shade Morocco. So they're very, very similar, to be honest. I think Morocco is a little bit, it looks a little bit brighter in swatch, but it's a little bit softer on the lips. Morocco is also a matte formula, whereas Only Yours is this new creamy formula, so it does look quite nice as well. But let me zoom you out and then we can get into my final thoughts. Let's first talk about the eyeshadow palette and some of the comparisons that I pulled together. So some of these shades, particularly the mattes, and I'm particularly talking about these bottom two here, we have definitely seen before from Nars. That's no secret. I will say the palette in my collection that gave me the most similarities was actually the Endless Nights palette. This was from holiday 2023. This one gave me the most similarities. Otherwise, the Afterglow Irresistible had the same mattes, but the top two shades I found a little bit harder to find within my Nars collection. So this palette definitely had some very similar shades. I'll pop up the swatches so you can kind of see. They're not identical, but I think if you have this one, you'll be able to create some very similar looks. Now, the palette that immediately came to mind on seeing this palette was from Natasha Denona, and this is the Retro palette. So looking at this one, I was definitely able to find some very, very similar shades, particularly the bottom two mattes. That sort of pink in the Nars palette, I wasn't able to identically match, but the shimmer, I was able to find something very similar from Natasha Denona. The Natasha Denona is, of course, much more metallic, much more sparkly, and just much more reflective in general, but I was definitely able to find something very, very similar. So if you have the Retro, you can definitely create something very similar to the looks you're going to get with this. And same with the Endless Nights palette. Again, they're not identical, but they're not vastly different, and on the eyes they might end up looking more similar than you think. I did quickly pull out the Pillow Talk quad from Charlotte Tilbury, but they really weren't as similar as I thought they might be. Really, the only similarity ended up being that pink, and they're actually not very similar pink shades. I also pulled out Pillow Talk Dreams just for comparison's sake, but this one really ended up being much more warm tone brown leaning than anything. So again, not the most similar on the eyes. I think you might be able to create some similar looks, but side by side, they really weren't that similar. And I also pulled out the Rose Quartz from Huda Beauty. And while I was able to match the bottom two mattes in the Nars quad, the top two shades really weren't that similar. The Rose Quartz ends up pulling a little bit more purple compared to this palette, so there really wasn't a ton of similarity there either. So basically, these bottom two deeper matte shades in the Nars palette are not unique. We definitely have these from Natasha Denona. We have these from our other Nars palettes. We definitely have those two shades in a lot of other palettes. And the top two are the ones that are more unique. This pink was actually kind of difficult for me to match in my collection, and then this shimmer is also very pretty. It's just a very, very pretty pinky shimmer. It's like a pinky nude, but it's beautiful, and I love how it looks on the eyes. It is that more Nars baked shimmer formula that's very thin, but just looks beautiful on the eyes. It's never going to enhance texture, but it's not going to be the most intense metallic shine either. So if you prefer that type of formula, you're really going to like this, and I do love the Nars formula. I do highly recommend it. But if you have, say, the Natasha Denona Retro, you can probably safely skip this one because you're going to be able to create some very similar looks. And if you have any of the other Nars palettes, just keep in mind you're going to have those deeper shades in here, but the top two shades actually are pretty new for Nars, and I love that they actually came up with a very Valentine's Day inspired color story, very appropriate. The packaging's beautiful, the color story is beautiful. I love the way the look came together, and this is definitely up to their fantastic quality, so I was really happy with the palette. The blush, I don't love that they just use their pre-existing shades in this packaging. I really don't love when they do that. And this shade Impassioned really does not go with today's look whatsoever. I do think it's a pretty color. I don't think it's one that I'm going to be reaching for all the time, but I do want to try it with some different looks to see how I like it. But this more sort of purple undertone pink really isn't my go-to, so I don't know how much I'm gonna love this, but I did really want to try the Nars reformulated blushes, so I am glad I picked this up, if only to try out the formula. But just keep in mind there is no point in rushing out to get the blushes when the shades pre-exist, at least this one. The lipstick, I absolutely love the Explicit formula. These are just so good. They are creamy formula, but they're just so incredibly comfortable and hydrating on the lips, but they're also somehow pretty long wearing for a cream formula. It's really unheard of to find a cream lipstick formula that is actually really long wearing, but this one actually is. So I'm always immensely impressed by that. This shade is definitely a little bit more warm leaning than I would typically enjoy, but swatch side by side the Nars Morocco shade, you can see that there was definitely a lot of similarities there as well. And if you don't love a matte formula, this could be a nice alternative to that. I do think this is a super beautiful shade. I love this packaging so much. I think it's so beautiful and the formula is fantastic. So while the shade isn't going to be an everyday go-to, I still think the formula and the packaging are absolutely fantastic. The palette's probably my favorite part of this collection, but the lipstick packaging absolutely wins and the lipstick formula is phenomenal. So I do highly recommend the palette and the lipstick if you like these shades, and if you don't already have a lot of these shades from the palette in your collection, I do recommend that. Blush, I do recommend skipping, especially if you have other Nars blushes, but the lipstick formula, if you haven't tried the Explicit formula, I do highly recommend it, whether it's this shade or one of their other ones. I just like the packaging on this one. But that is it for me today. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. Did you try anything from this collection? Are you thinking about it? Did you decide against it? Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And don't forget to stay tuned for the new YSL quad. That will probably be coming in a couple of days, but once again, let me know all of your thoughts down below. I love hearing from you guys so much. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!